Hey everyone, welcome to episode 371 of the All Dolphins podcast for this Saturday, September 28th. Do I have my date right? Yes, Saturday, September 28th, 2024, 2 days before the Miami Dolphins return to action against the Tennessee Titans for a Monday Night Football matchup at Hard Rock Stadium. We can only hope it's as exciting of a game as it was last night, Friday night at Hard Rock Stadium, a college game between the University of Miami and Virginia Tech, one that made alums Braxton Berrios and Jalen Phillips of the Miami Dolphins very happy. I'm sure cornerback Kendall Fuller, who played at Virginia Tech, wasn't quite as thrilled with the ending, which, if you didn't see the game, featured Virginia Tech scoring on an apparent Hail Mary from the 30-yard line on the final play of the game to steal the win, only to have the officials overturn the ruling after review. And truth be told, it was really, really difficult to discern whether the catch was made, whether it should have been a touchdown or an incompletion. But that's beside the fact. I am flying solo today, and today's about recapping the news of the day, and there's a lot of it, and analyzing the significance of everything that happened, including some very significant developments in the final injury report, and not so much from the Miami Dolphins side, because head coach Mike McDaniel had pretty much painted the picture when he met the media before practice, but from the Tennessee Titans side, with two very significant injuries that could certainly affect the game and help the Dolphins offense, which will have a new starting quarterback, which is also part of the news. So let us start with this, probably the biggest piece of news for this Saturday, September 28th, and that would be the announcement from head coach Mike McDaniel before practice that it is indeed going to be Tyler Snoop Huntley at quarterback for the Dolphins against Tennessee. McDaniel indicated that he kind of had a feeling pretty early in the week of practice that Skylar Thompson's rib injury would not be healed sufficiently to allow him to function at quarterback for the game against Tennessee. So as a result, what we're going to have is the Dolphins starting a different quarterback for a third consecutive game. And if you're thinking to yourself, man, that's unusual. Well, unfortunately for the Dolphins, it hasn't been that unusual in the past couple of seasons, because it happened not once but twice in the 2022 season when Tua was dealing with his concussion injuries. And you may recall that in weeks 4, 5, and 6 that year, it was Tua against Cincinnati, Teddy Bridgewater for one play against the Jets in week 5, and then Skylar Thompson starting against Minnesota in week 6. And then at the end of the season, it was Tua starting week 16, against the Green Bay Packers. Teddy Bridgewater starting game week 17. I'm going to get it right eventually, I promise. Week 17 against the New England Patriots. And finally, Skylar Thompson back again starting week 18 against the New York Jets of that 2022 season, the game the Dolphins won 11-6 to make the playoffs. It's also rare, and I'd have to do some research to find out when the last time that this has happened, if it has ever happened. The Dolphins now will have two starting quarterbacks in back-to-back weeks. No, they're two active. Let me rephrase that. There are two active quarterbacks on Sunday. Will be two guys who were not even with the team when on the active roster when the regular season began. Those two being, of course, Tim Boyle, who's going to serve as the backup. We should mention that. And, of course, Tyler Huntley, who the Dolphins signed off the Baltimore Ravens practice squad after Tungo Vailoa sustained a concussion in week 2 against the Buffalo Bills. So, as I just mentioned, Tim Boyle will serve as the number 2 quarterback. Skylar Thompson, who is going to be listed as questionable for the game, will, in all likelihood, serve as the emergency third quarterback unless it's deemed that he absolutely positively cannot play. What we can tell you from observing him the little bit that we saw at practice this week in the portion open to the media, which is basically the first about 20 minutes of practice, he just did not look very comfortable. You could tell this was not a guy who was 100%. So the fact that Mike McDaniel went with Tyler Huntley, not a surprise in the least here. Now, for those thinking, wow, Tyler Huntley's a quarterback, which means a whole lot of running plays and bootlegs and all that good stuff, it's certainly possible that could happen. However, Mike McDaniel's comments basically were like, yeah, this is a guy who everybody knows he can run, but his job as well is to make the offense function the way it's supposed to function. Takes 1/11th, the old cliche of 1/11th. Basically, the tone being the basic premise of the offense is not necessarily just going to be overhauled because it's Tyler Huntley and not Tim Boyle or Skylar Thompson at quarterback. As for why Tyler Huntley, pardon me again, I'm going through puberty here. You have to bear with me. Why Tyler Huntley and not Tim Boyle? Basically, Mike McDaniel talked about the experience that Tyler Huntley came in with when the Dolphins signed him off the Ravens practice squad. And Huntley's starting experience actually is 9 games over 3 seasons with the Ravens as their backup to Lamar Jackson. The last time he started was in the 2023 season finale when the Ravens already had wrapped up the number 1 seed in the AFC playoffs, set a bunch of starters. It was raining in Baltimore when they were facing the Pittsburgh Steelers, who needed a win to get into the playoffs, and the Steelers won that game 17-10. Huntley's performance was okay. The circumstances obviously were not ideal. Certainly hope that it will be better come Monday night for the Dolphins, who need to get back on track after starting off 1-2 with their consecutive losses against Buffalo and Seattle. As we said before earlier on the podcast, it's the first time in the Mike McDaniel era, 3rd season, that the Dolphins have been under 500 at any point. This, of course, helped by the fact that the Dolphins started 3-0 in each of the past 2 seasons. Not the case this year. In fact, it's a far cry from week 3 of last year when the Dolphins were flying high, or as much as Dolphins can fly high. But you get the gist. Dolphins were 3-0 at this time last year, coming off a 70-20 rout, dismantling, whatever word you want to use, of the Denver Broncos in, did I say Denver? Denver Broncos in their season opener at Hard Rock Stadium. I mentioned hopefully Tyler Huntley having some success against the Tennessee Titans defense. This is where we get to the final injury report of the week. Mind you, those can change with additions. Usually on Saturdays, you can have players who are downgraded. That happens frequently. But as it stands right now in the final injury report, here are the 2 major developments on Friday potentially impacting the Tennessee Titans. Number 1, Jeffrey Simmons, their 2-time Pro Bowl defensive tackle, who's among the best defensive linemen in the NFL, listed as doubtful with an elbow injury. His absence obviously would make a huge difference in the middle of that Tennessee defensive line. Certainly could help the Dolphin running game. And this is a guy who can contribute as a pass rusher as well. Furthermore, cornerback L'Jarius Sneed, and we had a story on this earlier today on Miami Dolphins on SI at si.com/NFL/Dolphins, or more simply, Miami Dolphins on si.com, about his battles, mainly the battle last year in the playoffs against Tyreek Hill when he was a member of the Kansas City Chiefs. Well, L'Jarius Sneed popped up on the injury report this day after being perfectly fine, Thursday and Friday, with a hamstring injury, listed as a limited participant in practice. And as you've heard me say many times on this podcast, if you see a player not on the injury report, shows up with an injury limited, more often than not, it's a pretty good guess that he got injured in practice. He is listed as questionable, so chance he could play. But immediately, if you're dealing with a hamstring injury as a cornerback, that means less than 100%, which is a big deal, particularly with the speed the Dolphins have at wide receiver with Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. We don't have to tell you what happened last year in that playoff game. Tyreek Hill wound up with 5 catches for 62 yards and 1 touchdown. He had the 1 53-yard touchdown. That was against Trent McDuffie, the all-pro slot corner. So if you do the math, crunch the numbers here, hold it, carry the 3, hold the 4, whatever, it comes out the other 4 catches were good for 9 yards. So Tyreek Hill was not a factor. There was also a video that made the rounds after that game of L'Jarius Sneed putting Hill on his butt, jamming him at the line of scrimmage before Hill could even get into his route. And Tyreek Hill commenting on that video saying, dude, jammed my butt, all the way to Cancun, which is where the Dolphins, ostensibly were headed after their playoff loss. So this game obviously would feature possibly a rematch of this. Sneed did not cover Hill the entire game per the Pro Football Focus numbers, courtesy of John Gunnan from the Nashville Post, our guest on Behind Enemy Lines earlier this week, an episode I encourage everyone to watch. There were 2 targets to Tyreek, well covered by L'Jarius Sneed, good for 1 catch for 9 yards. So he was not effective. Was not a good day for the Dolphin offense overall on that day. The Titans, of course, acquired L'Jarius Sneed in the offseason because Sneed wanted a new big contract. The Chiefs had other players to sign, namely Chris Jones, their stud defensive tackle, decided to make the move, traded him to the Titans where he got his new contract. He's off to an okay start, not great. His opponent passer rating is at 92, I want to say, per Pro Football Reference. Last year was at 56.2, which is superb. In fact, doing the research, it came up as tied for third among all cornerbacks who started at least 12 games last year. He was at, again, 56.2. Jalen Ramsey, for those wondering, was at 51.1, started 10 games, so he wasn't in that particular category listing. But L'Jarius Sneed is a very good cornerback. Now, also, we should note that the other Tennessee starting quarterback, Chidobe Awuzie, was placed on injured reserve on Friday with a groin injury. This is also something else that John Glennon told us on Tuesday when we did Behind Enemy Lines, that this was a move that was coming. So Tennessee very well could be without their two starting cornerbacks for this game, along with their stud defensive tackle. So this is a case where the Dolphins offense, again, despite the fact they don't have their starting quarterback, have all the pieces in place to get healthy in this game, or at the very least get healthier after what we saw last Sunday at Seattle in the 24-3 loss, which was not good. So these were the only two injuries. And then the only other injury on the Tennessee injury report, again, also deals with a member of the secondary, that being safety Amani Hooker, who again is listed with a mysterious face injury, and he is listed as questionable. Moving to the Dolphins, they listed two players as out. This was a confirmation of what head coach Mike McDaniel said before practice Saturday. That's Kendall Fuller, the cornerback, the aforementioned cornerback from Virginia Tech, and tackle Teron Armstead, both of whom sustained a concussion in the game against Seattle. And it was interesting because I went back and looked to try to see if I could pick out when Armstead got injured, and it happened on a play where Jalen Wright gained 8 yards on a run up the middle, and Armstead from his left tackle spot came into block inside, wound up going to the ground while delivering the block, and then came up with his hand up to his face, stayed in the game, wasn't really involved in the next play, and then the two plays after. It was a passing situation. Skylar Thompson was sacked on the play, but Teron Armstead completely stonewalled Jaron Reed at the line of scrimmage. Didn't look like anything going on there, but then he left the game, and that was it. So, again, it's a bit of a mysterious injury. Didn't see exactly what happened to Kendall Fuller, but those two guys are out. Linebacker David Long Jr. with a hamstring injury and hoping to face his former team for a second consecutive season. Remember, he played his first 4 years with Tennessee before joining the Dolphins. He is listed as doubtful with that hamstring injury. And, of course, this is where the folks in Tennessee might chortle, because before he left the Titans, he was called out at the end of a season by Mike Vrabel as one of two players who needed to take better care of their body to avoid the soft tissue injuries that were a problem for Long during his time with the Titans. McDaniel, however, could not rave more about the effort and the toughness that Long has showed all week, and basically said that if he doesn't play Monday night, it's going to be because it was mathematically impossible, because the guy's doing everything in his power to get himself out there. If he doesn't start, and then we should address also the contingency plans at the other positions. Let's move on to the rest of the Dolphins final injury report. 3 players were listed as questionable. They included running back Raheem Mostert, who's got a chest injury, has missed the last 2 games with that injury sustained in the opener against the Jacksonville Jaguars. We have wide receiver Malik Washington with the quad injury, been limited all week. He has yet to make his NFL debut because of that particular injury. And this is where I'm going to put on my glasses and look at my injury report, because I don't remember off the top of my head who the third player listed as questionable was. And it was, let me see, it was Skylar Thompson, quarterback with the rib injury. What's it say when it's right in front of your nose and you don't see it? Yeah. So again, Skylar Thompson, he's either going to be the emergency third quarterback, or he's going to be inactive, since he doesn't occupy a spot as an emergency third quarterback. You can get another player. It doesn't really make a difference. But obviously, Dolphins are not going to put him out there if he's going to be put himself in harm's way if he plays. The good news here is that Saran Neal and Storm Duck, the two cornerbacks who were dealing with injuries this week, along with Kendall Fuller, did not get a game status designation, which means they are going to play, which means that the crisis has been averted as far as the cornerback position is concerned. So now, as far as, and Duck, we should mention, wore the red jersey on Thursday and Friday. That's the no contact jersey for players who were nursing some kind of injury. And Saran Neal actually didn't practice at all on Thursday, which was the first practice of the week. Now, as far as the contingency plans at cornerback, based on the fact that Storm Duck was gotten in there whenever the Dolphins have used three cornerbacks, one would think he'd be the one to get the start, would be his first NFL start opposite Jalen Ramsey. And the hope here is that the Dolphins do a lot of traveling, meaning shadowing with Jalen Ramsey on DeAndre Hopkins, who had a big Game 7 for $124 last year in that Monday night game that we revisited and featured on Miami Dolphins on SI, the website that I encourage you guys to check out each and every day for anywhere from 5 to 10 stories a day. It's filled and refreshed with fresh content all the time. So please check it out. So the best guess again here would be Storm Duck starting opposite Jalen Ramsey. Does the possibility exist the Dolphins could elevate one of their cornerbacks in the practice squad to make up for the absence of Kendall Fuller? Absolutely. And in this case, we'd be looking at Nick Needham, or more than likely Nick Needham, and then possibly Isaiah Johnson, the rookie free agent. For Teron Armstead at left tackle, it was Kendall Lamb, the veteran, who came into the game after Armstead left. Mike McDaniel said after the game, when he was asked why not Patrick Paul, the rookie second-round pick who was in the game, active, and basically McDaniel's answer was he didn't want to put the rookie out there before he was ready, and certainly not put him in adverse circumstances that could affect the performance. And reading between the lines, also the confidence of putting a guy in there before he's ready, having a bad performance, and then you got a guy whose confidence is shot and needs to be rebuilt very quickly. That happens, by the way. Now they've had a full week, actually more than a full week, 8 days, to prepare Patrick Paul to potentially start. So do not be surprised if it's Patrick Paul who starts at left tackle against Tennessee. We would be looking at another guy making potentially his first NFL start. In case you're wondering, Tennessee does have two pretty good edge pass rushers, Harold Landry the third on one side, Arden Key on the other side. But the pass rush is going to be affected if it turns out that Jeffrey Simmons indeed does not play. So we have addressed those two. If David Long does not play, one would think Anthony Walker was the first guy that was mentioned to defensive coordinator Anthony Weaver when he did his weekly media session on Friday. It's normally Thursday, but everything was pushed back this week. And Weaver was quick to say, don't sleep on Duke Riley. So could it possibly be Duke Riley and not Anthony Walker Jr.? Stay tuned. Could this mean if Long doesn't play that Channing Tindall will be active for the first time this season? Certainly a very strong possibility. And at wide receiver, if Malik Washington doesn't play, then certainly one of the two wide receivers will be elevated from the practice squad, whether it be Eric Ezukama or D. Eskridge. If Washington does play, that would give the Dolphins 4 active wide receivers: Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, Braxton Berrios, and Washington. In that case, very possibly the Dolphins still would elevate a practice squad wide receiver, but certainly not as much of a certainty. Moving on to the next topic. The next topic is going to be fines, which is not so fine for the players who are involved. And the Dolphins had 3 of those as a result of what happened in the game against the Seattle Seahawks. And this is something that happens usually at the end of the week, every week by the NFL office. And more often than not, you're going to get a player, at least one player from every team. Dolphins did not have a player who was fined for anything for the game against the Buffalo Bills. 3 players, again, as we mentioned, against Seattle. Duke Riley was fined almost $17,000 for a blindside block. I haven't looked at the replay, sorry. Fullback Alec Ingold was fined $11,800 I'm rounding out the numbers. They're actually very specific in terms of the amount, but I'm rounding out to the nearest 100. So 11,800 for Alec Ingold for a low block. And then cornerback Kader Kohu was fined 5,500 for a face mask. It was against Jackson Smith-Njigba. That one I saw the replay. No, it was not the play where his hand got up in the face mask. And with that, we're going to wrap it up. How about that? Hope it was a fine episode. Get it? Fines episode. Okay. That when corny joke time, it means it's time to call it a day. Hope you guys enjoyed this this edition of the All Dolphins podcast. My plan right now is to do a live podcast on Sunday night that will serve as a final preview for the game against the Tennessee Titans. It would be around 8 p.m. You will be seeing a notification. I'll put a notification out as well on social media. In the meantime, please like, subscribe, all that good stuff. I love you guys. The guys who tune in regularly. Big heart for you guys. Appreciate it more than words can say, and I don't say it nearly often enough, but I do appreciate each and every one of you. Thanks for tuning in. Enjoy the rest of your day.